This is Join Us in France, episode 344, 344. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we look around France so you can best enjoy France as a destination. We talk about French culture, history, gastronomy, and everything it takes to have a lovely experience in France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Gerogia Broome about growing roots in the southwest of France. Gerogia lives in England and has been a Francophile her whole life. She fell in love with a house that needs some TLC, to say the least, in the southwest, and she shares how she's going about making it the home of her dreams. If you like what we do here at Join Us in France, consider supporting us by visiting joinusinfrance.com/boutique to check out my cookbook, my tours and services, such as my itinerary review, where I help you craft the best vacation in France specifically for you. I've turned off the purchase page for a couple of weeks for the itinerary review service. I'll turn it back on July 21st, 2021, because I'm taking my own summer break. In the meantime, take a look at my GPS self-guided tour of Paris at joinusinfrance.com/audio tours, where you can take me in your pocket as you walk around Paris. And I want to remind you that Elise, who is such an integral part of this podcast and puts a lot of her time and energy into it, also has a Patreon page, and I would love to see her get more support from all of you. Go to patreon.com/Elise Art, ELYSART, to let her know how much you appreciate her. I certainly do. Follow Addicted to France on Instagram to see Georgia's photos of the things she loves in France. I'll post them this week. And the best way to stay in touch with me and with the podcast is to sign up for the newsletter at joinusinfrance.com/newsletter. This week, I'll share a photo of Annie and Elise at the beach. No swimsuit photos. We do not want to scare the children. Bonjour, Gerogia Broome, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie.
How lovely to talk to you all the way from sunny England. How about that?
I know, what a surprise. Who would have thought? I think it's as hot in Oxfordshire today as it is where our house is in France. So I think that's definitely a rare occasion.
Right. Yeah, Toulouse is pretty hot today. It's 33 degrees. So
oh wow,
yes. The air conditioner is definitely on kind of, not full blast, but a little bit, just to help.
Just to take the edge off.
Yeah.
That's the difference, of course, in England, is that as soon as it gets to this level of weather, with no air conditioning in England, everyone starts to complain.
Of course.
Of course.
There's plenty of places in France with no air conditioning, and people also complain.
That's true. That's very true.
So we want to talk about your life experience and your desire to grow roots in the southwest of France. And I approve of that since that's where I'm from and I love the area. So I just want to hear all about your journey and what brought you to this point. So you already own the house.
We do, yes. We have the big key. The key that I think every English person wants, that big metal key that's as big as your hand. So we have the key and now we just need to grow the roots and get there, definitely.
Right. So it's a key to an older home that you purchased. Can you tell us more about where this house is?
Yes. So it's in the Aude, in the Department 11, which is in l'Occitanie, which is the southwest of France.
Yep.
It's up in the hills behind Narbonne, heading up towards the mountain, towards the Pyrenees. It's in a tiny little village called Tournisson. It's next to a bigger village that people know called La Grasse.
Oh,
La
yes.
Grasse, yes. Every time you say that, people go, oh, yes, no, I know what you mean. La Grasse is famous, I think, in that area.
Oh, and it's beautiful too.
It is beautiful. So Tournisson is its little neighbour that isn't quite as well known, that I think most people probably drive through. And we bought a lovely maison de maître, so what the French call a master's house,
right.
Which has quite specific architectural details. So the master's house, they're not the chateau, but they have the high ceilings, the big rooms, quite often marble fireplaces, big stairs. It's
right.
sort of, that kind of beautiful architecture.
Right.
It was built in it was finished in 1879. So it's a lovely, beautiful old home. And it was sort of like an awful online affair. I fell in love with it on Le Bon Coin and had to go and see it. Sort of was looking at it behind my husband's back and was emailing the estate agent. I was completely and utterly in love with it.
Oh,
and then had to admit to my husband that I had to get on a plane and fly to Carcassonne for a weekend to go and see it. So no, it's completely, I think when I was little and I pictured my home in France, it's exactly what I pictured. And in that area of France, you can still buy those homes and they're relatively affordable. So having fallen in love with it online, I just had to go and see it. So yes, that's a wonderful big key that I have.
Yeah.
Sadly, I can't get there at the moment, but it's a beautiful house to have.
So how long have you owned this beautiful home?
So we've owned it for just over a year and a half now.
Okay, so mostly COVID times.
Mostly COVID and Brexit. Yes, it's been a wonderful combination of events.
Yes, you lucked out on that.
Yes, yeah. So hopefully the everything will be brighter from now on, and I think we can already start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're booking in now builders, and we're hoping to be there this summer, and then we can start doing some work and breathe some life back into this wonderful old home.
Yeah.
It was really magical. I was able to have, as I said, I found it online on Le Bon Coin. I think that's where you find all the best houses. I think for any of your listeners looking for houses in France, you have to look on Le Bon Coin.
Yeah.
I found it and emailed the estate agent, sort of questioning what was the background. Could she send me more photos? And I think she could completely see that I would be in love with all of those details. So she did a very good selling job where she sent me a wonderful story all about the owner. So they were going back. So they've owned they've owned the house since it was built. And the family were a local winemaking family. And they had the house built in the village near their vineyards as the big house of the village. And they built it, and sadly it wasn't a good wine year, so they put the stairs up to a third floor that was never built because the récolte that year wasn't as good as they hoped it was going to be. But they built this wonderful big house, and then they attached it to a smaller house behind that was for workers that they had, and it even has a forge in it, an ironmonger's forge. And so a lot of the details in the house were made in the forge of the house behind. So it has a metal front door. It has beautiful metal details on the stairs, and it's really quite beautiful.
Are these wooden stairs or stone stairs?
They're stone stairs.
Oh, wow.
That even have still written on them in lovely old French handwriting, first step to first floor, second step to first floor. Like, it has all the stairs are still numbered, which my husband laughed and said, I think that means the family never cleaned because the marks are still there from when the stairs went in, which I feel like it's the house for me then if it was never cleaned. I think we're meant to be.
Yeah, because all the maisons de maître I've been in, either they make wooden floor, in which case they'd be some old oak or something. They're very nice as well, but they're creaky.
Yeah.
So the stone stairs, it's probably better sound-wise.
Yes, especially with 2 young children. I think that's always better. Then we won't hopefully hear them running up and down the stairs. But yeah, it's amazing. And it had a secret passageway, so you could go through to the house behind. What looked like a cupboard, and you opened it and you could appear then in the house behind. So absolutely lovely details, absolutely wonderful. So I got all of this background, and I asked them, the family who was selling it, to draw me a family tree, so I could see all the generations who lived there. And at one stage there was quite a scandal because one of the aunts married the forgeron from the house behind.
Oh, and dear, yes.
All these yes.
Yeah, no.
Wonderful stories.
Now you need a ghost or two.
Ah, yes, definitely. Well, it's funny because when we the buying was extremely straightforward, and when we went out to pick up our big key, the one of the sons of the family was in the remise, and he had all of these heirlooms from the home. So he had all of the mirrors that fit above the fireplaces. And all of these old family portraits, the aunt, all these other portraits, and which of course he was trying to sell to us. So he had them all laid out like a brocante, and he was like, "Oh, would you like these? And would you like that? I'll do you a price." It was quite a funny experience.
Yeah.
And
so did you?
And so we picked the mirrors because we felt like they matched the mouldings of the walls above us. So those but the strange picture of his aunt, we didn't take. Talking of ghosts, we kind of felt like she would watch on us slightly. So we had to politely decline. And then he put them all in a wheelbarrow and wheelbarrowed them off down the road, because it turns out, of course, he owns, 3 buildings in the village.
Yeah.
And so he was wheeling them off to his garage down the road, and he wheeled it all off. But so no, we didn't end up with a picture of the aunt who'd had the affair.
So I'm assuming you speak French.
Yes,
right.
Yes. So I grew up in France as a child. Yes.
Ça simplifie la vie un peu quand même.
Oui, c'est clair. And I think it's not essential, obviously, for buying a house in France, but it helps so much.
Yeah.
Being able to read through the papers, being able to have those conversations, being able to talk to the estate agent. I think, of course, it makes a big difference.
Right.
Being able to do all of that.
Right.
Even, I was still tested because you don't learn a lot of the legal terms at school. You don't know. We got the French, you get a diagnostic when you buy a house, so you get the big report about the condition of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And in our 70-page diagnostic, there were lots of words, obviously, that I had never heard of before.
And I'm sure some French people wouldn't have either. I mean,
exactly.
This is not vocabulary that we use every day.
No, exactly. And even exactly that. My husband was saying, well, even when you buy a house in the UK in English, there's still moments where you kind of think,
right,
I don't think I actually know that. And so it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, being able to speak French. And for us, this, as you said, it's about growing roots again in France. So we have 2 young girls who are bilingual. And it's about giving them a place. So every summer when we're there, all of the holidays when we're there, they're able to make friends and make connections and speak French and kind of make those ties as well, which hopefully will last.
So how come you grew up in France?
So my dad is a skipper on yachts.
Mm-hmm.
And my mum was a chef on yachts. So they met on a boat in the Mediterranean. And so their first home was near Nice.
Uh-huh.
And they bought then a holiday home. One of my brothers actually was born in France. They then bought a holiday home in Goult, in the Luberon, in the Vaucluse. So we used to go every sort of summer holidays, and we'd sometimes go for winter holidays as well. And when I was 9, my mum decided she wanted to go and do a year in Provence, which was funny. It was about the time when there was a book called A Year in Provence. We became a cliche, I think, of English families going out for a year. So my mum and I packed up a cat and a puppy and all of our belongings in a car and moved to our holiday home for a year. I went to there was a village school, and I went to the village school, and they were absolutely wonderful. They got a French dictionary. They put me in maternelle in the kindergarten section in the morning, so I could learn to sing my alphabet and the basic words. And they really helped me. And by the end of the year, not only had my mum decided we'd stay, but I was bilingual.
Sure.
So we lived in Goult until I needed to go to collège. And then we moved to L'Isle-sur-la-Sorgue, which is a big antique town.
But
near
still in
Avignon.
Provence, yeah?
Yeah. So we moved there. So I went to collège there, and my mum stayed there for 30 years. I then went to university in Avignon. So it's still in the Vaucluse. Yeah. I actually even have 84 tattooed on my arm because it was such a big part of my life.
Vaucluse all the way.
Yeah, Vaucluse all the way. And
that's the number, by the way, for listeners. Every department in France has a number, and I know some of them by heart, but not many of them. But 84 is obvious because V is the end of the alphabet, and so that would be, we have 90 departments, so, it's towards the end of the alphabet. So that would be Vaucluse.
Yeah. And it's so funny how trying to explain to my husband, but it's so strange because now we've bought a house in the 11, and our postcode will be 11. It's funny how much I think French people associate with their number.
It's really important, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, and when I was younger, it was on your car number plate and all. It was such a big part.
It still is, but now you don't have to change the plate when you buy a new car, and so, but French people still get a sticker to put over. Like my husband just bought a car from a different department, and I tease him because he hasn't bought the sticker yet to cover it up. I'm like, wrong department, dude.
It's so funny because I had friends who lived on the other side of the Rhône who had 83. Number plates when we got our first cars when we were 18, and I can't get in a car with an 83 number
That's
plate.
Right.
It's such a French thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he couldn't care less. He's like,
no, obviously
he's American. He doesn't care, but I do. Eventually, I'll buy it for him and stick it on.
So the 84 has a big place in my heart. And then,
so why didn't you buy over there
in the 84? We would have had to win the lottery.
Right. Okay, money. Yeah. Okay.
We did look, but I think we would have ended up with a house, like a lotissement house, and that really wasn't the dream that I had.
Right.
We looked. My mum actually moved from how dare she? My mum moved from the 84 to Vence in the hills behind Nice a few years ago, and we looked there, but it didn't feel like home at all.
Yeah.
And it's equally expensive. My dad is in Béziers, so Les Hauts. So getting a bit closer.
Yes.
So that's why I started looking around there. And then one night on Le Bon Coin, just sort of expanded my search basically down to Spain. And sort of was looking all around those small villages, between, Narbonne and the border. And that's how I found, this house. So it's an area that we don't know.
But it's beautiful.
It's so stunning. And it really reminds me, when you drive through with all the vineyards and the olive trees, it really reminds me of the Vaucluse when we moved there. The sort of the valley going from Goult to Apt. It's very, very, there's lots of similarities, in the vista all around there. The little hilltop villages, the platane lined roads.
Right.
There's that all those aspects. But I think for my husband, who's very sporty, it's the best, it's got mountain biking and paddle boarding. We're just next to a river. It has sort of all of those aspects of outdoor life. The beaches there are a lot more quiet than the round towards my mum.
It's nothing like Nice.
It's nothing like Nice, exactly.
Yeah, thank goodness.
So yes, yeah.
That's just me.
It's been beautiful. It's been really lovely. We've been discovering Gruissan and all of that area, the little village. I mean, you could spend listening to your podcast. You can spend so much time just each individual village, all the castles around there. There's just so much to see.
Yeah, you can hike to a lot of chateaus. Well, Cassar, so-called Cassar castles.
Yeah,
that are just it's a fun hike. It's just and it's doable with young kids. And there's a lot of them. And some of them are really scenic. Not all of them, but eventually we'll do an episode on each of them. But we have time. Yeah, it's a gorgeous area. And the gastronomy in the area is lovely. The prices are quite reasonable compared to what they would be in Provence, obviously. It has, maison de maître can't have been completely cheap, but it's affordable for regular mortals.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the process like for you? Was it fairly straightforward? You just picked a house, fell in love, got a hold of the estate agent. I should mention that on Le Bon Coin, you can buy, there are a lot of professionals who sell through Le Bon Coin. So if you're a car, if you sell used cars or homes or things like that, you can have a professional account on Le Bon Coin. So it's not just buying by owner. It can be also buying from an agent on Le Bon Coin. Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, you can have direct sales, but there's also estate agents use it too. Exactly. Right. So we had a lovely estate agent. She was very nice. We put in, as I said, I flew out to Carcassonne for a weekend. So easy. Obviously, Ryanair airport is, 10, 15 minutes from Carcassonne.
Is that resuming again? Because they stopped it during the
I know.
pandemic.
I was looking before this episode trying to work out. They have started some flights. They're not at the level that they were pre-COVID.
Right.
But they have started flying again.
Right, because from Carcassonne, you can get a flight to Glasgow. I know that because I've been on it.
Yeah.
Where else in the UK?
You can go to London as well.
Okay.
So it's Stansted.
Okay.
Luton is Toulouse, I think.
Okay.
But there's so many options for flying from the UK to that area. Well, there was pre-COVID, but I'm sure they'll resume. You could fly into Toulouse, you could fly into Carcassonne, you can fly into Béziers, Montpellier, and none of those, you could fly into Perpignan. None of those are actually that far. There's kind of, an hour and a half either way. Because the motorway runs through that area. So you can generally get quite quickly across, I find, that area of France.
Yeah, so long as you have a car, though, because you couldn't get to your village without a car.
That's true, yeah. So
La Grasse, probably, right? You'd probably be able to get a bus or something to La Grasse.
Yes, I would guess, yes, because it's such a tourist area.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, yes, you probably could get there. So I flew out to Carcassonne for the weekend. My husband then flew out 2 weeks later to see it. We offered asking price. So it was really priced. It had been empty. The parents had moved out of the house in the 80s. They'd decided they didn't want the upkeep of an old home, which is quite often the case, sadly, in France. And they literally boarded the whole place up. They sold the metal door closed, and they moved to a more modern home and left it empty for that long. So it was price to sell. So we offered asking, which then they are, as I understand it, obliged to accept because you're offering what it is advertised for.
True.
Then we signed the compromis within I think it was 4 weeks of that, because it was June, from May to June. I flew out to sign the compromis, and we completed in September.
Right. So it went, really quickly,
quick.
Considering that it's over the summer holidays.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think there was an extra 2 weeks added in for the 14 août, because obviously nobody works then.
But it's the 15 août.
The 15 août, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. My daughter's birthday is the 14th. That's why I said that.
14 juillet, 15 août.
I know.
Yeah.
So no, it was really, but I think it was straightforward because we knew what we were getting. We knew, you could see the condition of the house. There was no negotiation on work. There was no negotiation on, there were no surprises. The diagnostic had already been done. We could quite clearly see, what worked, what didn't work.
Right. Probably not a lot worked.
Not a lot worked.
Right.
Exactly. There's no water counter. They removed the water counter.
Wow.
So that they didn't have to pay taxe d'habitation.
Dang.
And the electric...
Which was probably, 50 euros a year, honestly.
I know.
That is just so dumb. Anyway.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah. And strangely, the water, it's things like that weirdly have been hard since. It's trying to have conversations with the water company where you say, hello, I'd like to have a water counter put in. And they say, oh, what model is the one that you have? No, we don't have one. Of course you have one. No,
right.
we really don't.
Right.
There's a gap. The pipe comes in and then there's a 15 centimetre gap and then the pipe work starts. There's a hole where it's meant to be. But no, we knew what we were getting. So I think a lot of the horror stories or longer processes that we've had with friends who've bought in France have been around unforeseen things that have come up or problems within the building that then need to be negotiated. And it's generally quite hard to negotiate, whether you split the cost or whether the person selling will cover the cost. And because I think we had none of that, it was really quite straightforward from beginning to end, which was wonderful.
Did you get the feeling they minded selling the house to English people? I mean, I know you're half French, but...
It was really interesting. The house was advertised and I must have just lucked out. The day that I happened to expand my search, the house was there and it had literally just come on. And so I spoke to this estate. I was out within a few weeks and the offer. So it all happened quite quickly. And then the estate agent called me up and she said, oh, I've had this really strange thing that's happened. And she said, I've been called by a French buyer saying, I've seen the house. I want to offer. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. It's too late. We've signed the compromis. And he said, oh, who? And she said, oh, an English family. And he was disgusted. Absolutely disgusted. How could such a beautiful house go to an English family? Why did she let that happen? And she had quite an awful time with this man he would send her emails, and carried on, sending her emails. And then he came to visit the house, 6 months after and put a note through the door to say how disgusted he was that English people had bought it.
Oh dear.
Yes. And she picks up our mail. So weirdly, she got it. So no, I think there can be obviously a bit of that, but the people that we've spoken to in the village have been absolutely lovely. And because it's a big house on the main street, like we've spoken to a lot of people in the village. They all came. They all come by and walk by when you're there and come and say hello.
Want to say hi,
desperate to see inside. So no, I think we've definitely felt welcome.
There's probably a lot of history to this house, and unfortunately, when that happens, people take sides, and a lot of I mean, my brother bought a house, a pretty big house in the Ariège. Well, actually, technically still in the Haute-Garonne, but barely. And it was a home that the family had pretty much abandoned as well, in a very similar situation to yours. The kids didn't want to do anything with it. But they couldn't agree on a price, and so it sat on the market forever, and it got moldy and nasty and whatever. And he just said, "Look, I'll take it, but for very little money." He offered, and he did, but he's been working on it for 30 years, and he's not quite done because he wants to use old materials and whatever. So he wants to, he wants to find an old beam that will just fit right instead of buying a new beam, like that sort of thing. But yeah, there are villages like that. But the fact that you speak French so well is, I'm sure, very helpful because, you're English on your passport, but you have French, so it's okay.
Exactly. No, it has made a real difference. And I think last summer, we did make it out there. We went to see my mum, and then we went over. We can't stay in the house because obviously there's no water. We stay in a gîte that's just opposite. And the fact that my girls are outside and they chat away in French, and they can see, that we're definitely trying, and we definitely want to get to know our neighbours and play a part in the community. And I think the one thing that the estate agent said to me, which I thought was very interesting, she said, if you are going to rent it out, if that's your plan down the line to rent it out, she said, please don't put it on Airbnb. She said these local families, the ones who do want to stay in the villages, they find it very hard to stay in the villages and to rent homes because now they're all Airbnb or holiday lets.
Yeah.
And she said you would make a lot of friends if financially you can, actually rent it out by the year so that local people can stay. And I thought it was a very interesting point to make, that you can picture, in some villages you'd have, and we have this in Oxfordshire, and you have that in holiday areas of the UK where people have bought second homes and they sit empty all winter, and then they're just full of tourists in the summer, and that doesn't necessarily build a community or so it's an interesting debate, I think, around second homes and holiday rentals.
Yeah, it's a problem in a lot of places, and probably this estate agent is correct that the locals would like you a lot more if some people buy a home like that for retirement, and so in the meantime you could rent it out. But for you have so much work to do there to begin with.
Yeah, that seems like so far away at the moment.
How much time?
Daughters, so they'll be doing it too.
How much time do you think it'll take to fix it all up?
So it's a big house, and it's a long house because it's in a village, so it's kind of only one room deep, but then quite long across the front. And so our plan is to split it into two.
So is it right on the sidewalk? Is it right?
It's right on the sidewalk.
Okay.
On the main road through Tournesson.
Okay, so you have
right there.
A garden in the back.
So we have no garden.
No.
No garden. But we have a big remise, which it's what the French called it's more than a garage, but it's a kind of outbuilding, I guess, attached on the side. And so our plan is to take the roof off. And create a courtyard garden. Okay. Yeah, because that would be hard to sell, especially in an area like the Aude. People spend a lot of time outside. Outside, of course.
So I think they would have been really foolish to not take your offer. Well, they had to take it anyway, since you offered asking price. Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting.
So we're cutting a little townhouse off the end, so a little 2-bedroom house, and that we hope to have habitable by the end of this year. I'm touching wood.
Divide and conquer, huh? That's
yes, exactly. Yes. And that we're kind of, we're not trying to restore. We're doing a nice job, but we're not, we're not doing what your brother's doing,
Right.
But in the big part of the house, the main part, which is what we want to keep for our retirement and our family home in France, that we do want to restore and take our time, but we need the little house to have somewhere to stay that's habitable.
Right, that's exactly what he did, as a matter of fact. Right, but it was the only part of the property that still had a heater that worked, kinda.
Yeah.
And so because it's in the mountains, and so you need the heat over there.
You do, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so he kind of restored that, just basic restoration, just so he could stay there on weekends. And then they moved on to other parts of the house. Did they leave a bunch of junk in the house?
No, they didn't leave anything.
That's good.
Anything at all.
That's good.
No, it was really good.
Yeah.
No, as I said, they'd taken the custom mirrors down to sell them to us, which is quite classic, I think, in France too.
Yeah.
I know my mum has said that she's bought houses before where the people have taken out the light bulbs, before she's moved in.
That's so silly. Anyway, so are you girls, is there a school in the village? Are you girls going to be going to the school in the village?
So there is a school in the village. It's a little école maternelle, and there is an école primaire, but it is split between the local, two other local villages. So the kids, because there aren't enough kids in those little villages, so they do 1 week at one school, a week at the other school, and a week at the third school with a bus system. So there is a school there. So last year our plan before COVID was to go out there for half a term so that they could go to the local school from Easter to the summer holidays.
Yeah.
But obviously, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But my girls actually, when my husband and I have moved around quite a bit, and when we were moving to the UK, our eldest was at the age of starting school. So we approached the French embassy, and the French embassy can provide a list of all the French speaking schools in the UK. Mm-hmm. And they list them by private schools and public schools. So we found a free public school in the UK that is bilingual from age 4 up to baccalaureate age, and our girls go there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So they do 2.5, it's full immersion. So they do 2.5 days in English and 2.5 days in French. And on the French days, they do the French curriculum, slightly adapted by the European schools, but so they do the French curriculum. So they're both bilingual already. So although they would benefit, of course, they would benefit from going to a French school. We kind of feel at the moment we've kind of got the best of both worlds.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when they get to collège and lycée?
So it goes all the way. So the school goes all the way up, collège, lycée, and
but I mean in France. So after you've moved to France.
Oh, if we move to France, I think at the moment we're kind of we're not quite sure. I think we definitely would love to move to France permanently, but I think it probably will end up being more, not quite our retirement age, but something, more a later life decision. I think because we found this school for the girls and it gives them bilingual schooling, because there are some bilingual schools near Tournisson, but I mean they're long bus journeys away.
Yeah.
And so for us having it here, I think we probably won't move until the girls have finished school, I'm guessing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think. And it's funny because I didn't do English at French school. So because when I started doing languages in collège, I spoke English. They said, "Oh, you'll get bored. Don't do English. Do German as a first language. Oh, do Spanish as a second language."
Right.
And then it got to terminale, and all of a sudden someone went, "Oh my God, she has to do English for her baccalaureate. Otherwise she has to take it." Yeah. So I did it for my last year, but I actually hadn't learned English at school since I was 9.
Yeah.
And
so this is different now. It has changed a lot. My daughter, who spoke English, had to take English as her first language. They made it mandatory sometime in the 2000s to take English as a first language. And so it was really ridiculous. And I pleaded with the principal and with she could not take either Spanish or German as her first foreign language. But she was good and she behaved and, but I was
Yeah.
really afraid that she was going to just, make the teacher's life miserable because the kid's
Yeah, of
bored,
course.
like, obviously, but she was
Correcting
compliant.
her accent.
Right. And the teachers always wanted to find something wrong with her English. So I can't tell you the number of times that she came home saying, I can't think of any specific examples, but sometimes she'd come home with something that was clearly a mistake that a French person speaking English would make. And she would say, well, the teacher says that's because I'm American, that in America they say, maybe in America we say it that way, but in England they don't. And I'm like, no, there's no way they say it like that in England either. This is just English from a French person. Don't worry about it, Anyway, it's a difficult problem for people who come here and want to put their kids in French school, which is always a good idea, I think.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to take English.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I think when I was a child, I was obviously before that decision. And I think it was really strange because actually, as much as I spoke English fluently from speaking it at home, I actually had quite a sort of a deficit in my written English, which wasn't at all identified. And it was only that last year, and it meant that I did well in my oral examination in English, but my written examination was awful for my baccalaureate, which everyone thought was hilarious, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I moved back to England after university in Avignon. And I actually had to go and do evening classes in English with all the sort of, quote, immigrants.
Right.
And they were all like, why are you here? I was like, I can't actually write English. It's really funny. It was a real gap.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's made me, and maybe slightly, I'm sort of quite set on it, that I really want the girls to have a full bilingual education, that there aren't gaps on one side or the other.
I think you're doing it right. Yes.
So that's what. And I think what's lovely is because it's so they're in the French stream, but there's a German stream and a Spanish stream at the school, so they get a wonderful cross. They get to see German traditions and Spanish traditions, and it's really. I really love the kind of ethos around it as well. It's very European in a country that obviously is slightly rejecting Europe at the moment.
Right now, yes.
Yes. So it's been really wonderful to be in that community here in the UK, because we have our village pub is Spanish, and we have a German baker who comes by. Like it's you couldn't get a more European bubble to be in.
Oh, that's good.
Which is really, it's really lovely. So the girls...
Sorry.
Yeah, no. So the girls know all about, La Fête des Rois and Carnaval and all of that. It's really nice.
That's cool. So has Brexit caused you any problems as far as paperwork and official things like that?
So we bought the house before Brexit went through, which I think was good. We had a French bank account, which has now been transferred to a international bank account. So that was a change. We didn't have a choice. That happened. As we speak now today, you and I, we can't travel to France. So obviously the COVID restrictions are, UK passport holders are being penalised. So we don't obviously have a carte de séjour or anything like that. So we can't come at the moment. But for dealing with tax and things like that, I've been doing everything online through the French online tax system and sending letters off in French. And we haven't seen any other problems, but
right.
Who knows? At the moment, I think it's a bit of an unknown. I think I know anecdotally from my father has a UK driver's license that he's been trying to transfer to a French UK driver's license for, I think, the best part of a year, and is struggling. I think there's lots of anecdotal problems that English friends and family that I know are struggling with. But so far, I think the impact, we haven't seen it with the house. We've seen the impact on our little European bubble here in England, where our school, lots of families have left, and then they're struggling to recruit teachers. So the native speaking teachers, the French, the German, the Spanish teachers for the school. So I think we've seen that impact.
Did they leave because they had to, or because they decided it was best?
I think there was a bit of, I'd probably say maybe 50-50 of not maybe feeling welcome anymore, or it not being the country that they felt that it was when they moved here.
Huh.
And then maybe 50% of looking at the criteria of Europeans staying in the UK. They were saying that you had to have so many years of, paying tax or proof of residency or lots of criteria to meet. Right. And I think people felt that they wouldn't make that criteria, so why stay?
Yeah.
So I think it was a bit of a mixture of both of those.
Which is such a shame, because I know lots of French people my age who went and stayed. They lived in the UK somewhere for a year or 2 or 3, and they just... You used to be able to do that, and it was great. You could just go and come back and move around and, learn a new language and have new experiences. And this is just making it harder. And
it really is.
Yeah.
And all the Erasmus programs with universities, the exchanges, all of that. It's gone. It's such a shame.
Yeah.
And I think our school was a accredited European school. And so it did the European baccalaureate at the end. And then so they had this awful year when the Brexit dates were moving, throughout, not last year, the year before, and where the kids did not know if they would be able to sit the European baccalaureate in the UK, depending on whether we were going to leave with a deal or no deal. And all that group of parents had to book for their children potentially to go to Brussels to sit the exam. I mean, it was horrible for those families.
Yeah.
And the school has now, because they're not allowed to do a European baccalaureate now, we're no longer in the EU, they've had to change to an international baccalaureate, so the IB, which means the school, as much as it's not great changes, it's still different. Books, a slightly different program, it's a different accreditation, and the school has had to completely transform its secondary
Wow.
And of course there's no money for that, there's no pot of money to do that,
of course.
It
seems silly.
Yeah.
So what would you, if people want to do this, the same sort of thing that you did, what advice would you give them? Like what pitfalls to avoid, or would you say to, obviously you tell them it's a great thing to do since you did it, but what did you learn in the process?
So as I said, I think Le Bon Coin is a wonderful place to look for houses. And I think even if you end up going with an estate agent, I think it's really good to use Le Bon Coin to look at the kind of houses in an area, prices, to get a kind of feel. I think then if you can, obviously it's not a guaranteed, if you can get an estate agent that you trust, and estate agents work differently in France, that they have to have a contract with the seller to represent their house, but they can approach houses for sales and sellers to see if that estate agent can work with them. So sometimes you can use one estate agent to go and see different houses. And I think if you've established that relationship, that can be really useful to have then that local connection. Our estate agent has keys to our home, and she goes there to open the shutters up when it gets hot. She closes, the windows in the winter. She'll send me photos of the birds that are nesting in our house. And she's been wonderful letting in builders to do quotes and things like that. So she's been a real local kind of asset to have. So that's been really good. I think we were very lucky that we knew what we were getting. And so we didn't have any kind of surprises with the diagnostic. But I think it's definitely, with these old homes, especially, I think you need to know what you're buying into. You need to, termites, lead paint, asbestos. There's lots of things that you need to look out for in the old homes. And I think comparatively to the UK, those are problems that are more expensive to fix in France. I think France, the tradesmen are very proud of their trade, but you then end up generally, you pay more, I think, for those specialist services that you do in the UK, definitely. So I think we were a bit slow to get set up on the French tax website, which meant that we ended up incurring a
penalty.
A penalty, thank you, on our taxe foncière, because we didn't know, obviously, that we'd received the letter. So I think getting yourself set up on that, and actually it's quite a straightforward system to use, because you can do it all online. You can pay, through a bank account. And then we use, from our experience of having lived abroad before, we use TransferWise for money transfer between the UK and France, because you get better rates for transferring money. And you can use them as before we had a bank account, we were able to use them as our bank account in the EU, because they can give you a RIB, which is let me try and think what that sounds. It's a relevé d'identité bancaire. So it's your French or your bank account details when people ask how to pay you.
Right. Yeah. It's your IBAN and your bank routing numbers and stuff like that.
Exactly. So when you're paying people, that you need, French people love a RIB.
Yes, they do. I think the dog sitter is going to come by to give me her rib in a bit there, because I know she's going to come back, often, and so I'll just set it up to pay her directly.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny because it's not something that you use in the UK. You don't. You do, of course, give people your bank account details, but I feel like you get asked for a RIB a lot in France. Anything you do, you seem to get asked. Or people send you your RIB. At the moment, I'm dealing with builders, and so I'm being sent RIBs all the time. I have a whole collection of them. Right. So I think that. And then there's lots of wonderful resources. Obviously, you have lots of wonderful resources. And we found, it's helpful to go and read other people's stories and to hear how they did it. Read about, possible pitfalls or what you need to look out for. Yeah. And I think it's that I would say though, with a touch of, positivity. Don't read all the negative stories, because you'll convince yourself that it will be a horrible experience. Yeah.
So how is it dealing with all the workers? Are you also finding them on Le Bon Coin, or how's that going?
I have an Instagram account which covers the renovation of the house, very slow renovation.
We got to follow you.
So it's called @_15, so number 15, 15.
But is it QUINZE?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. Yep. Through that, I found a family or a couple who live in the village. And I was able to ask them for a builder. Through the estate agent, I found an electrician. The electrician recommended a plumber. It's kind of all been,
right.
Word of mouth. They clearly all, they
all know each other, obviously.
They'll work together anyway. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been able to do that. And actually, they've all been brilliant at working with someone who's not there, and they've been happy to WhatsApp and send photos and go back and forward. And so far, again, touch wood, it seems to all be going well.
So they've had to redo the whole electrical system, I'm assuming.
We have to do, So I learned on YouTube how to do electrical plans. So I've drawn the,
Wow.
The joy of YouTube. So I've done the electrical plans for the house. And the electrician should start on that. We're waiting for our counter to be moved, which is a whole other, it's a whole dossier. Everything's a dossier in France. It's a whole other file of paperwork to get the counter moved. And then, so then he should start in September. And then the plumbers will start then, and I've got a builder going in at the end of the month to put in new stairs. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenge. And I would have preferred to have been there for a lot of it, but we're trying to do it, how we can at the moment.
Right, because with Brexit, you can't even come right now. Although now that you own a home, maybe
it's not one of the current exceptions.
Exceptions. Oh, is it?
No,
okay.
No.
I think it will soon be though, because things are moving fast.
Yes, and I think it's like in a COVID world. You don't know. 2 weeks, it could be good, it could be bad. It will all change, I'm sure, before we know it. And I think the summers are taking last year. I think the summers are better anyway. So we're hoping this summer will be there. And we were able, before Brexit kicked in, we had a truck of furniture and things for the house sent down there so that we wouldn't get then import duties, which people were saying would come into effect post-Brexit. Mm-hmm. So we sent down furniture and we had some stairs made in the UK for the house, flat packed, that we sent down too. Mm. So that's all waiting in the house, kind of ready to go when we can get some builders in there. Yes.
What an adventure you had. That is so cool. Well, honestly, this is going to sound, I hope it doesn't sound too bad, but I haven't talked to a lot of English people who were as big of a Francophile as you are. I mean, I've talked to a lot of English people who've moved to France, but mostly for the weather, and they don't really learn French that well, some of them, And
no, I know.
So it doesn't go quite as, they're not enthusiastic about, the French ways. Let's put it that way.
I love the French ways. I love it. My husband said he distinctly remembers me teaching my little girls how to say bof with the shoulders.
I love it.
It has to, that's part of them growing up.
I love it.
And how the bread comes with a quignon. That's a very specific part of the bread.
Of course, yeah.
And
it's the best bit.
It's the best bit, and it's the bit that kids always have to eat in the boulangerie before you've even walked out, obviously. Yeah. Or as you're going around the supermarket, it's the bit that you give them to keep them quiet in the trolley.
Very true.
Very true. No, I absolutely. It's really funny because I was called l'anglaise, the English girl.
Yeah.
For my years at collège. And then at lycée, I didn't have an English accent by that stage. And my first job that I got out of after school was at Sephora, which is a big perfumery makeup chain in France. And they hired me because in Avignon, of course, there's lots of tourists, and they hired me because I could speak English to the tourists coming in.
Sure.
And of course, I by that stage, I was full French. So when tourists would come up to me and speak to me in English, I would pretend I didn't know what they were saying. And I would be particularly rude and walk off. And I could see my boss in the back of the shop, shaking his head going, Georgia, you're meant to speak English. I'm not going to speak English to them. They can try and speak French. And I think one of your episodes that you talk about is the power of saying bonjour and making that connection and showing. And I think that is so true.
You got to try at least a little bit.
You have to try, and they will really open up if you do. But any tourist who came up to me and just started speaking English, I'd literally I'd just look at them. I don't understand what you're saying.
I was totally surprised to meet friends of my daughter's who did not know that she could speak English.
Oh, yes.
She just didn't want to tell them.
No, because you don't. I think when you become... I think there's a period in your late teens. I definitely found that anyway. I didn't want to be different.
Right.
I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be the French. And I didn't want to say that I was English.
Right. And so, then, go ahead. Sorry.
Then you get into your 20s and all of a sudden you realize, oh no, actually it gets you a job.
Exactly.
It helps. It's another asset that you have.
So at the university, she got somebody who was helping all the students put together a resume and all that. And she had put that she could speak English, but she didn't say, native. And the lady who was helping her looked at her cross-eyed and like, aren't you American, like native? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, but put it right at the top.
Yeah.
That matters. Yeah. Put it at the top. Yeah. And she's like, okay, if I have to. Oh, yeah. It's really strange, but that's just human nature, I guess.
It is. It's really funny. And I had such a similar experience. The first job I got in the UK was working for was doing PR for government, and they had a French minister over, and this French minister and this English minister were meant to be doing a press conference, and they realized they didn't have a translator on site. No one had booked a translator. They'd assumed wrongly that this French minister spoke English.
Yeah.
He really didn't. And so they were all looking around and they all looked so panicked. And so I sort of stepped forward and said, oh no, I can help.
I'll do it.
It's fine. Although I have to say, I quickly realized that direct translation is a skill that
terrible.
You have to learn.
It's really
because
hard.
People speak so quickly and you've forgotten the first thing that they've said by the time. But anyway.
Yeah, you have to train very hard to do that.
You do, yeah. And so I did, I translated it all, and they all, wide eyes all around the room, especially from the people that I was working with, like, oh, we didn't know that you could do that.
Right.
And then the worst thing was, at the end, the French minister came up to me and he told me that I sounded like I came from the foot of a vine.
The foot of a vine, huh?
The foot, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because my accent was Vaucluse, like.
Oh, there you
Vaucluse,
go. That's great.
And I was very Provençal.
Oh, and they have a bit of a distinct accent in the Aude as well, but it sounds lovely.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Georgia, we've been talking too long. We have to bring it to a close, but it has been so delightful to speak to you. I hope everything goes great with your renovations and that the house turns out to be everything you hope it'll be, because it sounds like a beautiful place. And you've shared some photos and I'll share them. And of course, tell people again your Instagram handle.
Yeah. So it's @_15.
QUINZE.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup, Georgia.
Merci. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us, PATREON. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have done it for years now. You are fantastic. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Paul Bader, Patricia Bader, and they signed up separately. I wonder if they're brother and sister or husband and wife. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, both of you. Holly Bailey and Charity Burr. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. And thank you, Tony Baker, for editing your pledge up. This week, I published a French history brief Patreon reward about a strange little woman who shocked everyone when they opened her last will and testament. I want to give you some feedback about the previous episode. Listeners wrote in about our episode on the Carnavalet Museum. Elizabeth said, I'm going to follow your suggestion and book 2 times on different days so that I don't get overwhelmed and I can enjoy at my leisure. Ted wrote, I had never heard of the Carnavalet before this podcast. It's definitely on my list now, and for sure it has been closed for several years, so it's not that surprising. Charlene said, this has been on my list for years. Thank you for covering it so I can enjoy a bit of it before I get back to it to see it in person. And last but not least, Dawn wrote, I booked 2 spots for my upcoming trip based on your recommendation. Just listened to the podcast on my evening walk, and I am more excited than ever to visit. Thank you for your feedback, everyone. And don't forget, if you learned from this podcast, people you know who are planning a trip to France would also benefit from this particular episode. You cannot share from the group, but if you look for the Join Us in France page, French on Facebook. You can share all the episodes you've enjoyed or tag your friends in the comments of a particular episode so they see it. This week in French news, we're still doing good on the COVID-19 front. 51% of French people have had one dose of the vaccine. 36% have had 2 doses. We're getting there. We're very lucky that vaccines are easy to get in France. Our medical care is great and inexpensive. Tests are easy to get and free. However, this is new. Visitors who need to get a PCR test before heading home will have to pay 49 euros and some change for their test. So plan on 50 euros for your test. And you should inquire at the nearest pharmacy to your hotel or wherever you're staying 5 days before your departure, and they'll set you up. That gives them enough time to give you an appointment, and then you come back and do the test, and it takes 24 hours to get the results. I want to mention something that's starting to come up again as people are traveling to France. There are a lot of threats of strikes, and people who are not French tend to take those a little bit too seriously. And it's possible also some of you have been scarred by previous unfortunate experiences with strikes. You have to understand that threatening to strike is a completely political move, and there's no way to know between the day when they announce a strike and the day when the strike actually happens. There's no way to know how many workers will actually participate in the strike. And remember that in France, people do not get paid for striking days. And so a lot of workers think twice about going on strike like that. So, I think a lot of the strikes that are being announced for this summer are going to be mostly duds. What's going to happen is that some services will be slowed down. You might experience a delay here or there, but I don't think there's going to be a situation where it becomes impossible to get around and what have you. Some inconveniencing probably, but when you're in France, you should always be prepared for that sort of thing, because we are a people that likes to strike a lot, too much in my opinion, but that's how it is. Also, French people are in a period when we are so glad to be doing better as far as the pandemic is concerned. We're so glad that the holidays, summer holidays are here now, that we're in a good mood overall, and French President Macron enjoys quite a bit of support. Now, French presidents are always mostly hated by at least half of the population. So if you talk to French people, they'll tell you they hate him, they can't stand him, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, anyway, he's... I think what's likely to happen is that people enjoy their vacations and are not so engaged in political issues at this time. It could happen again. It could come back. But, for now, I think it'll be pretty quiet. So if you see announcements about strikes, just be prepared to be a little bit flexible. So in my opinion, it is also better if you book your train tickets directly from oui.sncf. So it's OUI.SNCF, because if you do it that way, if there are delays or strikes or things like that, you can use their app, named the same, to see what's happening with your ticket and in real time, and also make changes if you need to. There are a lot of other people reselling these tickets, and the reason why these get recommended so much by travel people is because they make an affiliate income on those recommendations. And I do this for other stuff, but I don't do it for the trains, because I think it's really important that you buy your train tickets straight from the horse's mouth, where you can see what's happening, and it's much easier that way, in my opinion. This week I'm listening to a book in French by an English author, and it's not a translation. It's an Englishman who grew up in France, who writes in French. The book is called L'Enfant de Poussière. The name of the author is Patrick Dewdney, I think, Dewdney, and it's the first in a fantasy series called Le Cycle de Sif. This young author was born in the UK but raised in France. His French is superb. The book is lyrical. It's set in France around the 800s, and it's very entertaining. The narrator is Nicolas Planchet, and he's also wonderful. I hadn't listened to a fantasy book in a long time, and this is definitely a favorite genre for me. And surprisingly, this book has not been translated into English. What do you know? Next week, I'll drive to my little apartment in Spain with Elise. We will enjoy the beach and do as little work as possible. The following week, Patricia, who's hosted me many times in Paris, will come for a visit as well. This summer is unusual for me because my husband has started a new job, so he doesn't get vacation time until Christmas, and my daughter is in the middle of her internship, so no summer vacation for her either. She's going to be hired in the company where she's doing her internship, and they've arranged for her to take 2 weeks between the end of the internship and the real job in September. So she'll probably go to Spain for those 2 weeks too, because the weather is absolutely wonderful in Spain in the fall. So I hope all of you get some fun time at the beach or wherever. And who knows, if you're coming to France, you know me, I want to hear from you because I would love to record a few trip reports that people can travel to France. And I just heard that people are expecting that about half the number of visitors to Paris will come this year. So normally over the 2 summer months, Paris gets about 10 million visitors. This year, they're expecting 5 million. Nobody from Asia, really, but a few Americans and nobody from England because they're not... we're not letting them in at this point. I don't know politics. Don't ask me. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/344, where you can see a recap of what we've talked about, as well as a link to relevant resources. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it and show them how to listen. Next week on the podcast, an episode about the nice city of Nice. Nice on the French Riviera. Elise and I share our favorite ways to explore the city and a walking tour that I think would let you see most of it in a very efficient time. And we also talk about a few of the surrounding areas in Provence that you might consider visiting at the same time. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2021 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.